Day 375 of doing a LeetCode problem every day until I get a job. All right, y'all. Welcome back to another day, another LeetCode problem where we're doing daily LeetCode problems. And today we have question number 3,335, total characters in string after transformations 1. The difficulty level is medium, but don't worry because we're going to keep the solution as simple and easy to understand as possible. But before we get started, y'all, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And if you need any new Apple AirPods, go ahead and check out that link in the description so you can get you some. Now let's see what the question says. You are given a string S and integer t representing the number of transformations to perform. In one transformation, every character in S is replaced according to the following rules. If the character is Z, replace it with the string AB. Otherwise, replace it with the next character in the alphabet. For example, A is replaced with B, B is replaced with C, and so on. Return the length of the resulting string after exactly t transformations. Since the answer may be very large, return it in a modulo 10 to the ninth power plus 7. All right, y'all. Sounds simple enough, but let's go ahead and take a look at these examples just to make sure we're doing this problem correctly. So in example 1, we have the input S equals a string A, B, C, Y, Y. T equals 2, the output is 7. Let's see how they got that output, right? So t equals 2, that means we have to perform 2 transformations. So the first transformation, A becomes B, B becomes C, C becomes D, Y becomes Z, and Y becomes Z. The string after the first transformation is the string B, C, D, Z, Z. So as you can see, first we started with no Z's because remember, Z is the only letter that we're going to have to add another letter, so it'll add 2 to the count instead, or excuse me, it'll add Z is the only letter that'll add 1 to the count. Excuse me, it'll add 1 to the count because we'll be replacing one letter with 2 letters. And as you can see, we started with no Z's, but that by the time we finished the first transformation, we have 2 Z's. So let's continue and see what happens after the second transformation. So after the second transformation, t equals 2, B becomes C, C becomes D, D becomes E, Z becomes AB, and Z becomes AB. So as you can see, these two Z's, this Z added an extra letter, and this Z added an extra letter, right? So altogether that adds 2 to the count because this Z adds 1 to the count, and this Z adds 1 to the count. It says the string after the second transformation becomes a string C, D, E, A, B, A, B. The length of the final string is the length of the string C, D, E, A, B, A, B, which has a count of 7 characters. So since after the final transformation, we have a count of 7 characters, the output is 7. Let's go ahead and take a look at example 2, just in case that didn't make sense. Example 2 is a little bit simpler. We're only dealing with one transformation, so let's get into it. In example 2, we have the input S equals AZBK, and t equals 1. The output is 5. Explanation says the first transformation, because t equals 1, the first and only transformation, A becomes B, Z becomes AB, B becomes C, and K becomes L. The string after the first transformation becomes BABCL, says the final length of the string BABCL, which has a total of 5 characters, so the output is 5 because after we transform this string into this string, the final string has 5 characters. Boom. Once again, the Z is going to add a character because we're going to turn the Z into an AB. So as you can see, we started with 4 characters, but with the Z, we ended with 5. Now that we understand the question, y'all, let's get into the fun part, the actual solution. Solution is not that difficult at all. So let's get started. First thing we're going to do is we are going to create a variable that's going to store our answer or the count of the final length. Excuse me. So for that, we could just declare a variable called ans, and we can set that equal to 0 to start. Then we need to initialize a frequency array for 26 lower characters. So for that, we are just going to declare a variable called CNT and set that equal to an array. Open up the parentheses is going to be repeating colon zeros, comma, count colon 26 because there's 26 letters in the alphabet. Now we need to count the frequency of each character in the input string. So for that, we're going to say for C in S, we're going to open up the brackets, and we're going to say let num equal int, open up the parentheses, C dot U T F 8 dot first, put the exclamation point, then we're going to say minus, we're going to put the string, open up a string, put A as a string, then we're going to say dot UTF 8 dot first, and put the exclamation point, and this is going to convert the character to index. So 0 will be A, 1 will be B, C will be 2 will be C, and so on, all the way up to 25 because we're starting from 0. 25 will be Z. Boom. Then we're going to come right here, and excuse me, y'all, we're going to come right here. We're going to say CNT square bracket num, and we're just going to increment that and say plus equals 1. Now we need to perform T rounds of the transformations. So for that, we could come underneath this for loop, and we could say for underscore n 1 dot 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 T, open up the brackets. Then the number of Z's, which will all be transformed into A and B, we're going to say let temp equal CNT square bracket 25, and that's going to represent all of the Z's, which we're going to have to transform into an A and a B. So then we're going to come underneath this, and we need to shift all the frequencies to the right by 1, which will simulate character shifting to the next in the alphabet. So for that, we're going to say for J in, open up the parentheses, 0 dot dot less than sign 25. Then we're going to say dot reversed. We're going to open up the bracket, and we're going to say CNT square bracket J plus 1. Come outside of that, we're going to say equal CNT square bracket J. Once again, that's going to shift all of the characters by 1 to simulate turning maybe an A into a B or a B into a C, and so on and so on. Then we're going to come underneath this for loop, still inside the bigger for loop, and we're going to say CNT square bracket 0 equals temp. And that's where Z becomes an A. Z also becomes a B, so we need to add B to the count. So for that, we could say, come underneath this, and we could say CNT square bracket 1. We could set that equal to, open up the parentheses, CNT square bracket 1 plus TMP, come outside the parentheses, and we're going to say mod 1 underscore 000 underscore 000 underscore 007. Boom. Now we need to sum up all character counts to get the final string length after all transformations. So for that, we come outside this for loop and start another for loop, and we can say for num in CNT. We can open up the brackets, and we're going to say ands equals, open up the parentheses, ands plus num, come outside those parentheses, we're going to say mod 1 underscore 000 underscore 000 underscore 007. Boom. Now we still need to return the final answer. So for that, we could just come right here, and we can say return ands. Boom. That should be all she wrote, y'all. Let's go ahead and give it a run. Make sure it runs properly before we submit it. Okay, so let's see where we went wrong here. We need to put some parentheses, so sorry about that, y'all. So let's go ahead and run it again. See if it runs this time. And it's accepted, y'all. So let's go ahead and submit it. Make sure it's still accepted after we submit it. Let's see. Ooh, look at that, y'all. 59 milliseconds beats 100% of users with Swift. That's what I'm talking about. That's what I like to see. Now, with that being said, y'all, make sure you get one more look at the code. This is the top half of the code. It's the rest of the code. And yeah, I hope y'all learned something today, and I hope to see y'all here tomorrow for another day, another LeetCode problem. See y'all then.